It's an Archaeodeath interview with the fake history hunter. Welcome, Archaeodeathlings, to another Archaeodeath interview with me, Professor Howard Williams, and my special guest this time is Joe. Please introduce yourself, Joe.
Hello, I'm Hedwig Teeuwisse. I'm better known as the fake history hunter, and I spend all my time running around the internet looking for people who are spreading fake history and correcting them. That's pretty much it.
that is the job description you've taken on for yourself. You are the fake history hunter, and there is a book which we're going to come on to, Fake History, 101 Things That Never Happened. And I was trying to find one or two that might have, but I was thwarted. But we shall come back to that in a little while. I would love to know, because we've chatted in various venues before, but I've never had a chance to talk to you, and I'm so excited, and particularly I want to learn, how did you become the fake history hunter? It sounds like a superhero role. There has to be an origin story where you're just a normal person living your life, and then you saw fake history, and you jumped in and saved.
And there was a chase, and there was a shooting, and I ran in front of someone. And no, it's very, very boring. I've been obsessed with history for as long as I can remember, like almost in an unhealthy manner. As a little girl, I was talking to paintings, hoping that they would come alive and tell me about the past. But yeah, history has been pretty much my life. And one day I was looking around Twitter, and I found someone who said something that I didn't believe. And too much to my shock and horror, of course. And so they shared a picture. They said it's from the 1920s. And I thought, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel, there's something wrong. So I started to research it, and I corrected them. And that was a lot of fun. So I found out that a lot of people were sharing the picture. So I corrected a lot of people. And some of them responded in a very nice, polite, happy way, being glad that someone corrected them.
Yes.
And some people got really, really angry and annoyed and wanted to fight. And I also enjoyed that interaction because I'm a bit of a troublemaker. So I thought, this is fun. Let's expand. And it got a bit out of hand.
But you've got a huge following on what is now X and other social media platforms. You're well established, and you basically are a phenomenon now.
Yeah, it's a bit surprising how many people decide that they want to follow what I do. I mean, it's mainly Twitter. On YouTube, I'm small. I've only just begun, and TikTok, I'm nothing compared to you on TikTok, but I'm working on it. But yeah, on Twitter, there is just a lot of people who got so sick and tired of all the fake history, and they just decide to follow me, and that it's like a snowball that's rolling down a hill. It's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
Well, that's very good, and we need more of this because there is so much out there, and I suppose it's a job for life because it'll never stop, because for various motives, and we can talk about motives of why you think people share this stuff. I mean, ignorance is one, I suppose, but there are other motives we can talk about, but there's never-ending supply. So I mean, I'd like before we delve into the kinds of things you debunk, I'd like to I'd like to learn a bit more about how you do it, because it started, I suspected as much from your book. It started with the visuals, with the fake photos, or the either just circulated misattributed photos that snowball or deliberate hoaxes that are being So I'd love to know, how do you go about this? How do you go about it? Sometimes it must be easy, sometimes it must be tough.
Well, it really depends. The images, there's two kinds of fake history. There are images with a fake story, and there are claims. Images is quite easy. You look at an image, and because I've had training in image analyzing for a very long time, I've done it for years and years, for decades almost, just looking at historical images and seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
So you get a sort of a sixth sense. You think, this is not quite as it's described. Sometimes you don't know why you think it. Sometimes you're wrong, of course. But when you look at it, you think, something's wrong here. So you throw it through Google. You've got reverse image searches, which are fantastic tools. and you try to trace it back to its origins. When was it first uploaded? And very often, not always, but very often, this leads you to the archive or the museum or the historian who first uploaded it to the internet with all the information you need. That's fantastic, and that's usually it's not always easy, but it's fun to do. I'm quite addicted to it, and it's convincing. It's very easy to convince someone if you have the actual source. With information, it's a little bit more complicated. It usually starts with something that you already know a lot about, or you think you know a lot about. You hear a story and you think, that's not how I remember it. So you get all your books, of which I have way too many, and you start looking it up and going through them and thinking, where did I read that? Where do I get this? And then you just simply start doing research, trying to find out what historians and museums and experts say on the subject, and see if you can find enough evidence to prove someone wrong.
And it's now produced. You have, you do it as threads on X, and you sort of keep your sort of the narrative going that way. But you also obviously now have the book. So I mean, if I may ask, of all the many myths online, how did you get down to 101? Because it's not as if, how can I scrape together a book about this? It's like, how do you select down? I'm guessing, so how did you do it?
Well, it's quite difficult, because I have indeed way too many stories, but not all of them are suitable. For a book, some of them are just not that interesting, because after a while you can only write a couple of chapters about this is a photo, and then I did a Google reverse image search, and then I found the truth. I mean, that's not that interesting, even though maybe just a picture book would be really cool. But I just looked at all the subjects I dealt with on the internet over the last couple of years, and all the ones that I liked the most, because I'm incredibly biased, but also the ones that I thought were the most interesting image-wise, and some that I thought were just important. And then I just wrote chapters about all of them, and then together with the publisher we looked at the ones that weren't so interesting, ones that were, but also there were a couple of that simply we couldn't get the rights to the image. So we just had to scrap them, the entire chapter, because the person who had the image either asked way too much money, or they didn't want the image to be used at all. And that kills the chapter, because you cannot write about a picture that's fake when you can't use the picture.
So you obviously, it's a selection of what is viable, and you've got a real good chronological range of fake history here. And I wanted to ask about whether you feel it is that's representative. I mean, because obviously the more closer you get to the present, there's more nonsense out there, and there's a lot about 20th century and Victorian stuff, but there's also some Romans and Egyptians and so on. Do you feel it is mainly a blight of modern photographic and art history, the connection of visuals online that drives this, or do you think every period, every time has this problem?
Sorry. I think fake history goes back to the very first person learning to talk. The moment people started communicating is the moment they started talking fake history. I'm convinced that some of those cave paintings of hunts, brave warriors defeating mammoths, are complete lies, fabrications, never happened. Just Dave going, yeah, that's that time I killed that, massive bison on my own. Nonsense. But of course, the amount of evidence and sources we have about anything has, expands as time goes on. We just have more. And of course, my personal interests are a bit more recent than ancient times. So, for instance, the ancient Greek and Romans, I apologize to everyone who's now offended, but that's, less my cup of tea than the Middle Ages or the 20th century. So that also plays a part. But if you need to research something and you have access to hundreds of online archives, it becomes a lot easier than trying to prove that Dave, the prehistoric caveman, was lying about that mammoth hunt. So it all plays a part.
And this is I mean, an interesting point I was going to ask was about, you're not just saying, people believe I mean, myths are an integral part of human society, of stories of how we came to be and where we came from, and legends about famed events that were exaggerated. But that's not, you're not talking about that. You're talking about sort of either accidental or deliberate fabrications of the construction of history. That's a different thing, isn't it? So myth busting is a popular phrase we use, but you're not myth busting, are you? You're kind of debunking fake history. And I don't know if you have constantly
I'm
have to.
hunting for liars.
Yeah, it's the deliberate, you know.
Well,
And
sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's purely ignorance or assumption. I don't think we can say that all the Victorian historians were lying when they were telling all their stories about the Middle Ages. It's just how they interpreted the sources that they had.
Yeah.
It's how you look at things. So some myths are just made up on the spot by people who know what they're doing, and others is just people doing their best and not realizing that they're telling something that's not right. So it's a bit of both.
And I suppose people are invested in these stories so that they get butthurt, they get upset that people are correcting them. But then there's also clearly an appetite for people who love the process of the debunking or the deconstruction of the revealing of the misinformation. Do you get people attached to this, emotionally, that you are ruining something of their identity?
Absolutely. And it's something I feel myself as well. I mean, there are sometimes myths that I debunk and I go, why did I have to go and debunk that? Because sometimes the story is much cooler. I mean, everyone agrees that Dark Ages is a fantastic term. It's a wonderful term. Vikings with horns on their helmets look fantastic, brilliant, cool. The idea that Marlene Dietrich was arrested because she wore trousers in public, and there is this amazing picture of her looking fantastic. I love all those stories, and sometimes I'm truly sad that I have to debunk myself. And this is the problem is that we were taught these things.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's difficult to accept that what you were taught is wrong, regardless, or if you like the fake story or not. It's not nice to be wrong about something, especially in public. So I completely get the knee-jerk reaction of people automatically defending themselves or attacking you or whatever. I completely get that. But yes, some people are just go, oh, wow, this is fantastic. I did not know that. And I have that as well. When someone corrects me, I automatically go, oh, there's so much new stuff I can learn and research and change what I know. But I get that a lot of people don't like it.
I mean, I must admit, I have gone through phases of being up and down with the fact checking or the debunking, because in some ways I see it can. I'm not saying yours do, because I think yours, I learn a lot from learning what I thought was, and I can't pretend. I'm not pure. I didn't even think about a lot of these, but I thought, surely that happened. Sure I heard that. None of us are pure and clear of all this, but sometimes I feel it can shut down people's interest if you just, all you can say is, and I've had that people online, people say, you've just ruined it. But then I try to always make the point that, but this is a way in. If you learn that the Vikings don't have horned helmets, then we can learn some cool stuff instead. It's just, if it's on its own and that's all you tell people, it can become like knocking people on the head. So I suppose I have mixed feelings about it, but I think it's an important part of what we do is to correct this stuff.
But there's also another bonus that I sometimes tell people who are a little bit sad about something being debunked, is I tell them that they now can become as annoying as I am. They can annoy their friends. And I've heard people that I've met people online that I corrected. They got very angry, and then a couple of months later I noticed that they are following me. And then one day I see a tweet of them saying, oh yeah, she corrected me as well and was really annoyed, but then I started correcting other people and that was a lot of fun, so now I follow her. And so people can change their mind. Sometimes it just takes a little to get over it. You're told bad news, you have to accepted, and then suddenly you're the person telling all your friends that Vikings didn't have horns on their helmets.
So it's like a pyramid scheme that you can sort of pass on the
You do.
Then it's like that horror film, The Ring, isn't it? That you have to pass it on to someone else. No, I'm teasing.
I will be crawling out of your television at one moment. There are people already going. If you say Vikings had horns on their helmet 3 times in a mirror, she appears out behind you.
No. I was going to ask actually though, because of course, people's motives are usually benign for sharing this. They don't know, but there are people who obviously there's an agenda here. So I mean, what are the top agendas you face of why people are sharing this stuff? Money must be one of them. Just they know they can get monetization out of popular
absolutely
fake history.
Tweeting something that gets 1 million views makes you more money than something that is less interesting. So there's a famous story about how medieval wives poisoned their husbands, but just a little bit. So they would come home every day, and then they'd give them the antidote, and they'd feel better, so they would never leave them. Which is a wonderful story, but it comes from a 1920s fantasy article and some 1990s movie. It's complete nonsense. Yeah. But if you share that story, everyone likes it. Everyone shares it. If you share the truth, here's this story I heard in a movie, nobody's going to care.
No.
But there's big money in just getting clout, just attention. It's on TikTok, social media, Twitter, everywhere these days. Yeah. If you post something that gets a lot of views, you make more money. It's that simple. And people don't care about history. They don't care about the environment. They don't care about makeup or whatever their account is about. All they care about is getting all those views. So that's a big reason for people not to care about what they're sharing, if it's true or not. Those accounts have all blocked me already. And then, of course, there's politics. People want to share a certain story that makes you feel a certain way about the opponent. We see that every time there's a war or a conflict somewhere in the world. We see it with Russia, Ukraine. We see it with the Middle East. People start, exaggerating stories. They start making up stories. We all know that that's been going on since the beginning of time as well. Then, of course, there's supremacy and racism and that sort of thing, or feeling the same thing between men and women, hateful men or hateful women. It's all those things when you want to make someone else look worse than they are. And you start making up stories about the past. But the same goes for if you want to make people look better than they were. You also start making up stories from the past, or you leave bits out, things like that. And those are all reasons for people spreading fake history on purpose.
And do you and I suppose different religion fits into the politics as well in that sense, I guess. It's a sort of, not necessarily, claims to religious experience, but religious figures in history and things like that, I guess, is another motivator.
I spent all day yesterday trying to get someone to prove that one of the pharaohs, I don't remember his name, they all have got his names I can't remember, that he was actually drowned when the sea was parted by Moses.
Good old Moses. And I remember that well. Yeah, I was there,
Of course you were. We all were, us time travelers.
We know this.
But, he says the water drowned that pharaoh. And I said, oh, okay, I know the story, but do you have any evidence of that? And of course, that's where it all falls apart.
Yeah.
And they don't like it.
No.
But it makes a story that they want to believe more true. They can't just go, oh, well, I think it happened, even though we can't prove it, which is perfectly fine. But when you ask, can you prove it, things become complicated. And with religion, of course, there's so many religious stories that people need to be true.
Yeah.
For them to believe that their group is better than another group or any other group in the world.
And how do you respond to people who say what I get a lot? Just let people have fun. What's the harm? That's what I get all the time. Just leave it alone. It's just music, bro. It's just a story, bro. Don't worry about it, bro. And I just get, well,
When people call me bro, I start calling them cis.
Yeah, I know. I get a lot of that. that kind of,
And then they get angry, which I find very amusing.
or dude. I get dude a lot.
I call them dudette if they call me that. They don't like that either. But yeah, I mean, of course, some of the fake history stories that I debunk are not that big a deal. I mean, they don't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. But then again, nothing does. But these things, they start living their own life, and something as innocent or harmless, little thing, Napoleon shot the nose off the Sphinx. If you say that on the internet and you don't mean anything with it, yeah, there is no harm in it. Of course not. Why would there be any harm in it? But people use that story to support another story.
Exactly.
They say he shot the nose off the Sphinx because the Sphinx had a black nose, and Napoleon was racist and didn't like that the pharaohs or the ancient Egyptians were black. So that's why he did it. So they use this story of Napoleon shooting the nose off the Sphinx to prove either that Europeans are racist or that the pharaohs were all black people with apparently black noses, whatever that means. And that is, of course, absolute nonsense. So that is the problem. It's not just the little story that's sometimes on its own completely harmless, but people use it to support something else. So it's an ingredient. It can be an ingredient.
That's
a
brilliant
fake.
Exactly. That's a brilliant way of articulating it, because it doesn't seem, you don't realize where it's going until you see it, and immobilized in only perhaps a minority of cases, but there you see the power of it when it's put into action.
And it's the same with all these quotations that people attribute to the wrong person.
Yes.
Does it matter that Einstein didn't say this or that? No, not really. It's a great quote. No, but it doesn't matter. But people use this quote to make themselves look intelligent. Here's this politician with millions of followers going, "Oh, look at me, I'm quoting Einstein because I'm so smart." And then I follow it up with something about the environment or, immigration or whatever, which is nonsense or not, doesn't matter. But they use something that's not true to make themselves appear more intelligent, more important, give themselves more credit. So on its own, it may not be harmful, but it can become harmful.
And one of the I was just looking at certain very far right rhetorical uses of TikTok is to just have simple slideshows of macho images of men from different cultures or warriors, and it's not the individual images.
I have no problem with slideshows of macho men.
Okay, all right, but these. I was making the point in the video that it's not the individual images are valid images of there's no more innocuous than anything else, but it's the combination, and then the quote that they're usually some rubbish quote from some very obvious source with of a certain dictator of a certain country, and you realize it's the power of images themselves, which are not, the images are not inaccurate, but it's as you say, it's the ingredient that makes it dangerous. It's the way that they're put together or composed, or the narrative is constructed. So it does matter, in other words, doesn't it, that we have these building blocks of nonsense are knocked down.
They're all, it may just be a lie, may just be a small Lego piece, but it can be used to build something big. So you have to be careful.
So why then aren't you the head of a Europe-wide or global institute of fake history hunting with whole minions of teams sent out, like some kind of secret organization to hunt down this music? Why, much as you have had a hit with this, why aren't you in charge of a global institute of rooting this stuff out? Because at one level the public appreciates this, but does academia, do governments, are people taking this seriously? Because I think they should, but I feel like we're all doing this kind of on the edges, in a sense. And I don't know if that's a fair sense.
It's difficult to say. I mean, I would love a global army of fake history hunters, but I doubt the funding will go through, especially because I imagine us all wearing Edwardian clothing.
Absolutely.
With monocles
essential monocles are absolutely integral, and various steampunk sort of weapons to fight off the evil forces.
And pokey sticks.
Yes, exactly.
But I think it matters. You see when you're talking, for instance, about fake AI history. This is alive currently. People talk about it a lot. So when historians start talking about it as well, they are listened to. But yeah, it's like the same sort of debunkers that do fake news and current affairs, that all they can do really is try and debunk as much as they can and hope that people notice it. But I'm not sure there is any sort of official institute, and maybe there shouldn't be, because if you're official, you're no longer independent.
Yeah.
For instance, if I am the leader of the fake history hunting army and someone says, well, you did something wrong, do I have to cover it up?
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
this
yeah.
person then have to mysteriously disappear because it ruins our reputation? So maybe it's good that we are just running around kicking open doors individually and going, you're wrong. But on the other hand, on Twitter, one of the few things that's sort of okay about Twitter is the community notes system, where people start writing community notes to posts that are incorrect, and these are seen by millions of people. So that it's not perfect, it's flawed in so many ways,
Yeah.
but it can work, and when it works, it's fantastic. So I think that is the best way. We just have to keep talking and shouting and hoping that someone hears us.
I think that's very optimistic, and I'm glad to hear it. But because I think we all feel a sense of despair when I'm going on repeat. And this is one of the final questions I wanted to ask of you: is that we're debunking, and then a duration down the line, here we are again. And you put that in the book in a number of places I noticed. Yeah, and this won't go away. And not saying that we failed, because it's a new generation and attention times and memories are short. What do you feel about that idea of the sort of almost like it's a never-ending circle of debunking that the pharaohs used slaves to build the pyramids, or that what was the other one I was just looking at? Women wore shorts, they caused a car crash, but it was all a picture taken from was it a film or something? My point is, do you feel it's a never-ending cycle?
Well, yes, it is, and even if, and I do feel that I do feel that, for instance, the Vikings wearing horns and helmets, that myth is absolutely dying. It's slowly dying, but it is dying. I mean, entire school classes are running around correcting museum guides about this already. I mean, the next generation will probably no longer believe that. So there is hope. But one myth is replaced by another one, and there will always be new ones, of course. That's why I think that the important thing that we do is not just debunking and not just correcting individual myths and misconceptions, but that we are showing people that what they are taught is sometimes wrong, it's sometimes nonsense, and that they have to start thinking critically and for themselves and doing research, and not just blindly believing what they're being spoon-fed. So maybe the myths on themselves are not our target, not our goal, but teaching people how to think for themselves, how to be critical of what they're taught, and not just going, oh, okay, fine. For instance, when I'm debating people, they send me TikTok videos as evidence of me being wrong, and I say to them, where is the source? Where are the references? Where's the evidence? Where is this just someone saying something and they're doing a little dance and they look really hot and they look really cool and maybe they're rapping it, whatever.
Yeah.
But do you not understand why this is not evidence? And they don't. They really don't. So maybe that's the big lesson that we actually have to teach people how to research and think about things and what facts and sources are.
One question I have to ask, but you may either deny.
I deny everything.
It wasn't
me. It was my evil twin sister. I was very drunk.
I knew it was. No, what I was going to ask was, do you get any pushback from academia? And let me double that up with the second part of the same question. Do you find that modern academia is actually creating some of the problems for you?
Yes, sometimes. And the problem with them, of course, is that when it comes from them, it automatically has so much more luggage and value. Because you automatically want to trust them. And it's a bit painful and difficult when I, for instance, read a new bestseller by a famous historian and you 10 pages in, you find something that you've debunked, and you go, how am I going to handle this? There are a lot of academia who have based their knowledge simply on copy pasting what came in books before them, which I can understand, because there are lots of historians whose books I read and trust, because I appreciate them, I respect them. I think they know how to do research. And then you find something and you read it and you think, oh my God, they just copied this from a Victorian book that has I know this story, there is no source for it. So that's a bit difficult. And sometimes they, because they have access to a lot of materials, and they argue and say, well, you're wrong, and here's everything that I've got. And then I say, well, I'm sorry, but here's everything I've got. And it's not as much as what you've got, but it does prove it wrong.
Yes.
So it doesn't happen as much, but it has happened and will happen again. And of course, sometimes I am wrong, which happens all the time, which is perfectly normal, which is fine. And that's great. I mean, that I don't mind being wrong, unlike 90% of people on Twitter.
But the thing is, yes, I mean, I've learned a lot from I'm on Twitter, but I just share my blog. I've given up trying to engage with particularly academics. They're the worst. But I do find TikTok educational for myself, because people do correct me. Like, I'll give you an example. I admitted I did a follow-up video and said I was wrong. I went to Silbury Hill, which the heritage sign says is the largest mound in prehistoric Europe. And the book that was written 9 years ago by the archaeologist who did the latest synthesis of all the survey and fieldwork called it the largest mound in Europe. And someone very patriotically from northern Italy published a paper last year in a peer-reviewed journal calling their mound the biggest in prehistoric Europe. Obviously, it's a bit of measuring competition going on between European archaeologists, but that someone from, I don't know, they're from Poland or Bulgaria or somewhere, in my comment section, who knew that story that I didn't know, said, hey, do you know about this new paper? And I went, oh, no, I didn't. And they're right. I read the paper. They were right. It is now a Bronze Age mound that's bigger than the Neolithic mound at Silbury Hill. But Silbury Hill's taller. But, my point is, I'm happy to be wrong. I don't care. It's all about
everyone. It happens all the time. And especially with historians and archaeologists. And, we focus so often on a very small subject or on a specific area. And that's why it's so fantastic when you meet a historian who's completely obsessed with one specific subject. For instance, I've just read a book that's just about medieval pigs, nothing else. And it's such a good book, and I learned so much from it. It was such fun to read. And my two favorite books that I've read in the last couple of years were all about medieval hygiene, which needs a complete, reparation. So when
they were all dirty, weren't they? They were all filthy, or whatever.
Yeah, which is of course not true, because that was the 1970s. But when historians focus on one subject, so much more is discovered, and it can change everything we know. There's just been a book published about hygiene in medieval Europe, but it's just in Spanish, and I can't read Spanish, and the writers are on Twitter. They're constantly interacting with me, and I'm going, I so badly want to read your book, because I know there's something in there that I didn't know that I can learn from, but it hasn't been translated. So that's the way it goes. And when you're online, you meet historians doing something here and there, and you learn, and there are entire continents that I know nothing about. And for instance, you just mentioned Italy. I met an Italian who said, well, we have a pyramid. Okay, it's only a step pyramid. Some people call it a plateau or something like that. It may not be technically a pyramid-ish sort of thing, but it's older than all the other pyramids on Earth. So this Italian was going very enthusiastically, going, this is the oldest pyramid ever. And there's all these other archaeologists going, well, it's not technically a pyramid, but it's pretty impressive nevertheless. And I didn't even know it existed. So
no. So you have so many, and sometimes there's a clear division, isn't there? And other times it's more of a strategy of getting a conversation going. Does this matter? Doesn't it matter? Is it partially true? Is it 10%? And that's the fun of study, isn't it? And we can all learn something by that journey.
Yeah, sometimes it's not the treasure, it's the friends you make along the way.
But sometimes it's the treasure. No,
God, I love treasure.
But no, absolutely. Well, I think that's a really good encapsulates a lot of what you're doing, and I just all just all hail to the great fake history hunter and all your efforts, and I hope you continue to debunk the history fakers, and I'm sure there's a book as a second or third and fourth volume of this that could be readily written. I was going to quiz you about some of it, but what's the point? It's all wrong. I mean, in the sense that you're right and it's all wrong. I want there to be a horned helmet, and I want there to be a horn. I want to.
If an archaeologist tomorrow finds a horned helmet that belonged to Vikings, I'll be the happiest woman on earth. I so badly want to be wrong.
But it would be fun, wouldn't it? I bet there's always a joke about maybe they all died off because their horns are on the inside. Was that Blackadder or something? I can't remember. It was, yes, sort of one of those. But no, I think it's a really good book. I'd recommend everyone get a copy. And there's as you say, not only can you learn a lot, but you can annoy your friends. Two for the price of one.
Strangers. You can go around, annoy strangers, especially museum and castle tours. You can just walk around, and when they go on about those clockwise stairs, you can be one of those really awful people who goes, excuse me, actually. You can be one of those people. What more do you want?
That is a really good one, and I actually examined a doctoral thesis at my university that debunked that a while back, and it's really did his whole thesis on spiral staircases. But this and I learned about that as well, and while I was examining the thesis. But here it is, one of 101 enshrined debunks or fake history outings, whatever the phrase is. Everything's calling out nowadays, isn't it? That's the new internet phrase. Everyone's called, so you call out 101 fake history. But it's wonderful, and thank you so much for joining me. And
thank you for inviting me.
Is there any final thoughts for our viewers and listeners that you'd like to reflect on before we conclude?
Just don't blindly believe what you're told. I mean, listen to experts, listen to people who know what they're talking about, but don't blindly believe things unless you've got a bit of evidence or have spoken to a lot of people who know what they're talking about. I mean, I don't want people to stop believing the experts, because that's a whole different
exactly
problem. But some influencer on TikTok, with all due respect to you,
no, absolutely,
making claims, it doesn't mean they're true.
Well, it's a funny thing is I've even done deliberately, obviously, overtly jokey ones, and people have gone, I believed that for the first 2.5 minutes, and in real anger. And I think, well, it was obviously a joke, but I'm too good at the. And so we have evidence of 50-foot pigs with wings, and I go through this, and I haven't done that one, but you've got to be careful.
It's very dangerous, because I now have that power to pretty much make people believe stuff. And I've tried a few times. I started to tweet with absolute nonsense, but then I just couldn't post it, so I had to add a little smiley winky at the end. Usually about stroopwafels and how brilliant the Dutch are, but in the end, I just had to add a little disclaimer before it would go viral or something like that.
No, I mean, even when I've supported a colleague on TikTok, or not necessarily an academic colleague, but someone, and I've been absolutely 100% I've supported them, people are still in the comments going, "Why are you attacking them?" And I'm going, so there's so much misunderstanding when you're dealing with this stuff. So it's probably best to not do the jokes, but I can't resist sometimes. But thank you so much for talking to me. It's been wonderful, and just keep doing what you do.
Will do, sir.
Follow Archaeodeath on YouTube, TikTok, WordPress, and a host of other social media.